This talk is emergent out of joint work with Noel McCarty at Princeton, who's my longtime collaborator on this research. So anything that's wrong with it, you can complain to him about. So we know about polarization in Congress is pretty bad, but let's look at some of the states out there. Of course, in Wisconsin, we had the occupation of the state capitol for a long time, the recall campaign against the governor, and I don't know if you're familiar with these two on the right hand side of the slide here. Those are justices, two of the justices on the Wisconsin Supreme Court. The one on the left is a Republican, and the one on the right is a Democrat. The polarization got so bad that they got into a fist fight, and the state police had to be called out. She accused him of choking her, and he said that he only did that to prevent her from punching him out. So we heard about the polarization of the Supreme Court. So there's a lot more territory to cover in terms of getting worse. But if you widen your perspective to when you're looking at the states, you also have to look at states like New York, which not long ago passed a assault gun control legislation with Republican support. And this is a state where Republicans effectively control the state Senate, so they're not just a minority party. Let's take a look at Rhode Island. Here's a statement from the Rhode Island Republican Party. Our state Republican caucus is deeply committed to the values of freedom, liberty, and limited government. That doesn't sound so unusual. In accordance with these values, we believe that freedom means freedom for everyone, and that every citizen of Rhode Island deserves the freedom to marry the person they love. So this doesn't sound like something the Republican Party in Congress would say, but there's lots and lots of state parties that look like this. So there's no uniform uniform political party across the country. There's big differences. And you saw a little bit from Seth's picture. This is a plot of state polarization where measured as the distance between the party medians, where larger numbers indicate more polarization. On the left, we have the plot of the average polarization, which is the one that Seth showed you over the time period that we have. And the one on the right is the one that's just for 2013. So this reflects new data for the states that's hopefully we're going to make public in the next couple of weeks on our website. And yeah, in California, Colorado, Arizona in 2013 really stand out as being the most polarized. In the bottom we have Rhode Island, Louisiana, Arkansas. This dotted line is, by the way, where Congress is. So most states are actually more polarized than Congress, but a couple of the states are actually less polarized than Congress, substantially less so. And this is the picture over time. Here are all the states. They're arrayed in order of most polarized to least polarized. This is California, Colorado, Washington, Arizona. So they're going up. Now, unfortunately, unlike Keith Poole and Howard Rosenthal's data, we don't have it going back to 1789. We only have it going back to the early 1990s, which probably post-dates a lot of the polarization that's happened in the 80s. Well, we have some initiatives to extend our data gathering process back, at least hopefully to the olden 80s, and hopefully we can capture a little bit of that dynamic. But in any case, you see the big picture in polarization across states is heterogeneity. So some states are polarizing quite rapidly. Other states are polarized but not really changing very much, and other states are unpolarized and also not changing very much. And then there's a state like Nebraska, which has started off unpolarized and is rapidly polarizing, as Seth mentioned. What about asymmetric polarization? So this tracks where the party medians are within each state over time. A state like California has rapidly polarized. Both parties are rapidly polarizing. And it's true in more states, the Republican Party is polarizing faster. But that is not true uniformly across states. You have a state like Georgia where the Republican Party it doesn't change very much over this time period, but whereas Democrats are going further to the left. And there's a couple of other states that are like that as well. So there isn't a uniform picture across the country where Republicans are uniformly the polarizing element. Okay, so we can decompose polarization as as Keith Poole and Howard and Nolan did in their 2009 paper, into divergence and sorting. And in the sorting world, the voters are sorted into districts, and the liberal districts vote Democrat, and the conservative districts vote Republican. And in the divergence world, even controlling for the opinion of the district, there's a divergence between the parties, and they show evidence in Congress that overwhelmingly the latter that's occurring. Okay, and so this is the look at the state legislative level. The horizontal axis is the estimated district ideology that I did in a separate paper. I'm not going to get into details of that. And the vertical axis is the state senator ideal point. So you can see that, and the dark line is the 45-degree line of perfect congruence. So this is not just responsiveness congruence. And then you have separate lines for Republicans and Democrats. You could see that there's lots and lots of divergence for even a district that's at 0 is going to be represented by a liberal Democrat or a conservative Republican. There's lots and lots of variation. One thing you'll also notice is that the line for Democrats is closer to congruence than it's for Republicans. Okay, so at the district level, there seems to be more proximity by Democrats. So in terms of primaries, so we have a paper by Seth, Nolan, Eric McGee, and Steve Rogers and myself, and we looked at this along a 2-decade period of primary systems, and states have changed quite dramatically, some of the primary systems. And no matter what primary system you look, and then we compared about the legislator ideology coming out of these systems, and no matter what system you look at, you just have the secular increase in polarization. Democrats and Republicans moving further apart, and there doesn't seem to be any pattern that's consistent with theory about why some systems would have more than others, and you could see this even dramatically within states. So in California, its blanket primaries ruled unconstitutional. There was not some increase. There was not a dramatic shift when it moved to the closed primary system. Let's look in particular at the recent reforms in California of redistricting reform, as well as the new top 2 primary system. So what I've done here is to compare the candidates, both the incumbents and the challengers, and compare them to the public as far as their ideology. On the left-hand side, we have the winners, and the Democrat, and I compare the winners in 2010 to 2012. There's not much difference, but these are the incumbent, right? These are the people who are the incumbents. We're not going to expect them to adjust to the new incentives of the system. The whole idea of these reforms was to incentivize moderation, right? So because theoretically you could appeal to the minority party within your district, and to do that you'd have to moderate. But the losers didn't respond at all. The challengers did not respond to the system. In fact, if anything, the Democratic challengers moved further to the left in 2012. So this doesn't look promising. Of course, we're going to have to look at further years, but does not look too promising. Noel and I have played a little bit with inequality at the state level. The data for state inequality is a little harder to get than it is for Congress. But one thing we do find is this: in most regions of the country, especially the West and the South, we see the expected positive relationship between inequality and polarization, but not in the Northeast, and why we're not 100% sure. So let's take a look at another reform that might kill the patient. So one cry of reformers has been we need more competitive districts. Okay, so you can get a competitive purple district if you have a nice unimodal distribution centered around in the moderate middle, but you could also get it by having a bimodal district with a large liberal, a large conservative set of voters. Here's the Denver-Boulder, Colorado area, and so yeah, Denver and Boulder are quite liberal, but they're surrounded by these conservative suburbs and exurbs. And here the distribution of the citizens, the ideology of the citizens. This is taken from the Warsaw and Tasanovich massive survey data. And so you can look at these distributions. To me, look bimodal. And so bimodal districts probably are not going to have this Downsian incentives to converge. What they're instead is going to incentivize is kind of a base-raising efforts by the parties, and we shouldn't expect these districts, who might otherwise are 50-50 Romney-Obama, might generate conservative legislators, and in fact, or liberal legislators, and in fact, we see states like Wisconsin, Michigan, Colorado, and these sort of states generate very, very extreme politicians, even though the states in presidential elections are the competitive purple states. So this is going to be this is coming out of a paper that I'm doing with Jonathan Rodden, Chris Tasnavich, Chris Warshaw, and Nolan McCarty. So we're going to look at the on the left-hand side is comparing the states by looking at the between-district ideological polarization. So is it the case that the districts, the states with big heterogeneity of districts, so some conservative districts, some liberal districts, do they get more polarization? Yes, they do. I mean, that's not surprising. That's something we should expect. But the big surprise is the polarization that emerges from within district heterogeneity. So the states that have the biggest amount of heterogeneity within the district, like those Colorado districts I showed you, are the ones that have high amount of polarization. We think it comes from this dynamic of focusing on your base when you're in a bimodal district. So you can just look at the raw data. So what we have here on the horizontal axis is the district level opinion. On the vertical axis is legislator ideology. And this is sorted into 3 panels based on the level of the heterogeneity within the state, within the district. Okay? In the districts that are relatively more homogeneous, the line is closer between the Republicans and the Democrats. But in the case where the heterogeneity is greatest, in those districts, like those that surround Boulder, you have the greatest divergence between Democrats and Republicans. So creating competitive districts could often mean, especially in these large Western states with plenty of geography and not that many Democrats to fill, what you're doing is you're creating conditions for increased polarization. So lastly speaking, so this polarization is not the end of the story. This has been alluded to before. California is ultra polarized, but it's also got a supermajority of Democrats, at least until one of them was convicted of drug running, or not drug running, gun running. I'm sorry. Maybe drugs. I don't know. But so it depends. It depends what the size of the majorities. And some of these states are so dominated by one party or the other. Polarization is effectively defanged, and the same is true for rules as well. Not all states have supermajoritarian rules. There's some that have purely majoritarian rules, and those are the states where polarization is not weaponized. And finally, as one consequence we could expect, as we see at the national level, is increased reliance on unilateralism by the governor or the executive branch in response to these difficult conditions. That reflects some paper I'm working on with Margaret Ferguson. And with that, I'll end. Thank you.